there's rejection, and then there's rebellion. What Shedeur Sanders did on draft night wasn't just a decision. It was a declaration. When he turned down offers from the Ravens, Eagles, and Browns, he wasn't just betting on himself. He was challenging the most tightly guarded institution in American sports, the NFL draft order. Cam Newton didn't hesitate to lay it all out. The revelation sent waves through every front office. Shedeur Sanders had options, legit ones, but still said no. Why? Because he refused to be another rookie, handed a clipboard and told to wait his turn behind someone else's franchise quarterback. He wasn't chasing a logo. He was building a legacy. And he knew his story had to start on his terms.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
NFL owners didn't take it well. This wasn't just about losing a player. It was about losing control. The idea that a rookie could effectively dictate his own career path, that's a kind of talk that gets you whispered about in boardrooms and quietly blackballed. But Shedeur didn't care. He wasn't bluffing. He was setting a precedent. The owners weren't just upset, they were terrified. Because for decades, they relied on compliance. Rookies show up, accept their slot, and play the role assigned. Shedeur Sanders exposed how fragile that obedience really was. Once players realize they can say no, the entire model begins to shake. And yet, this wasn't ego. It was execution. Sanders didn't reject mentorship or structure. He rejected stagnation. He respects the game, respects the greats, and studies the best. But what he doesn't respect is a system that buries talent in depth charts for the sake of tradition. The worst part for the league is that he might actually be right. If Sanders had accepted any of those offers, he'd be parked behind elite quarterbacks for years, soaking up playbooks and press conferences while his talent atrophied. By holding out, he gave himself a shot at real development, actual reps, a team that believes in building around him, not just stashing him. This is exactly what owners feared when Deion Sanders started preaching empowerment. It's what they dreaded when Cam Newton began calling out the league's hypocrisies. It's why stories like this get downplayed, distorted, or ignored altogether. Because if Shedeur succeeds, the ripple will be massive. Draft culture would change overnight. Rookies could start negotiating destinations. College stars might bypass dream teams for real opportunity. And the old school notion that loyalty and patience are the only ways to earn respect? Gone. This wasn't just a kid skipping teams. It was a strike against a machine. The draft process has always been about control. But Shedeur Sanders just reminded the NFL that control only works if everyone plays along. And he's already rewritten the rules. NFL owners are scrambling. Executives are whispering behind closed doors. A quiet panic is spreading through the league, not because of an injury, a scandal, or a surprise retirement. No, what's got the NFL establishment in meltdown mode is a single sentence from Cam Newton that set off an earthquake. Shedeur Sanders turned down 3 NFL teams on draft night. Baltimore, Philadelphia, Cleveland. All 3 made approaches. All 3 were shut down. Not out of ego, not out of arrogance, but out of strategy. That's what Cam Newton wanted to make crystal clear. During a candid moment, Newton confirmed what insiders had quietly suspected. Shedeur Sanders, a top quarterback prospect and son of Deion Sanders, had the opportunity to join 3 major NFL franchises and passed. Not because he didn't want to be in the league, but because he wasn't going to accept a role that was predetermined, limiting, and frankly, disrespectful to his potential. And in doing so, Sanders didn't just disrupt the draft. He disrupted the entire power structure of the NFL. For decades, the draft has operated under one core belief. Players wait. Teams decide. Franchises hold the cards, and rookies play the hand they're dealt. Especially quarterbacks. Especially rookies with big names. You're expected to be grateful, even if the path forward is non-existent. But Shedeur didn't comply with that narrative. He challenged it. And now, the NFL is facing the fallout of what happens when a player refuses to be a pawn. Let's break down the dynamics. Baltimore has Lamar Jackson. Philadelphia has Jalen Hurts. Cleveland has a quarterback carousel with no clear long-term answer, just a history of dysfunction. Each of these teams offered Shedeur a seat, but none of them offered him a future. They weren't looking for a young QB to compete. They were looking for insurance policies, talented names who would never see the field unless something went catastrophically wrong. For Sanders, those offers weren't opportunities. They were stalls, parking spots, a sideline with no path forward. And that's the trap that so many rookies fall into. They're drafted into organizations that have no real plan for them, no development strategy, just depth chart politics and PR optics. But Shedeur, armed with self-awareness, mentorship from his father Deion Sanders, and clarity about what he wants from his career, refused to be boxed in. He evaluated the situation and saw the truth. These teams weren't offering development. They were offering distraction, a flashy backup to keep the media happy. Nothing more. This is where Cam Newton's commentary cut through the noise. Because Cam's not just another former player giving hot takes. He lived the life of a high-profile quarterback. He knows how franchises sell dreams they have no intention of delivering. He's seen the difference between being wanted and being used. So when he defended Shedeur's decision as calculated and respectful, it mattered. He wasn't hyping up ego. He was backing up player agency, something the NFL still struggles to accept. And the reaction from league insiders? Predictable. Murmurs of entitlement, coded criticisms, the usual pushback when a player dares to control his own story. Because let's be honest, the NFL isn't used to being told no, especially not by someone who hasn't even played it down. That's what's really driving the outrage. Not that Shedeur rejected offers, but that he understood he had the right to do so. He didn't scream about it. He didn't trash the teams. He simply declined roles that didn't align with his goals. And that, to NFL executives, is more threatening than any scandal. Because if Shedeur's move sets a precedent, if other top-tier rookies begin entering the draft with questions and boundaries, the entire system starts to crack. The draft has never truly been about mutual fit. It's about organizational power. Teams choose players. Players accept. But what happens when players start evaluating franchises with the same scrutiny? What happens when players start rejecting roles that only exist to maintain the status quo? That's the real fear. That Shedeur might be first, but not the last. Because when players see someone turning down a backup job to Lamar Jackson and still maintaining respect, still keeping options open, still holding his value, that changes the math. It sends a message that you don't have to accept bad terms just to get your foot in the door. And make no mistake, these offers were bad terms. Not on paper, maybe, but in context. Sanders would have entered a system where he'd be expected to sit, wait, learn, but never truly grow. There's no accountability for teams that stall young QBs. No penalty for burying prospects. No incentive to develop someone unless it fits the franchise's timeline. And that's what Shedeur refused to accept. He didn't want a placeholder role. He wanted a plan, a path, a team that sees him not just as an option, but as an investment. He's not looking for a shortcut to stardom. He's looking for a sustainable career. And that's why this moment is bigger than one player. Because the NFL has never had to reckon with rookies who treat the draft as a negotiation, as a partnership, as a two-way evaluation. If Shedeur's bet pays off, the ripple effects will be massive. Players coming into the league will start asking the tough questions. What does this team's development system look like? Who's mentoring me? What's the timeline for growth? Where do I fit in 2 years? And when the answers aren't good enough, they'll do what Shedeur did, walk away. That is the future the NFL is trying to prevent. A future where players aren't afraid to say, I deserve better. And let's be clear, this isn't about players demanding to start on day one. It's about players demanding intentional development. About refusing to be shelved for the comfort of teams clinging to the status quo. This is where figures like Deion Sanders and Cam Newton matter. They're not just icons, they're architects of a new culture. One where players are allowed to be strategic, to be professional, to own their narrative before someone else writes it for them. And that's what Shedeur just did. He didn't burn the league down. He didn't even raise his voice. He just proved that you can say no and still be valuable. That you don't have to settle for the first jersey they hand you if the system behind it isn't designed for your success. The owners can fume. The media can spin. But the shift is already happening. Shedeur Sanders stood his ground. And in doing so, he may have just opened the door to an entirely new era, where rookies aren't silent assets, but active architects of their careers. So what's next? Will Shedeur's decision inspire other players to take similar stands? Will franchises be forced to rethink how they approach their rookie quarterbacks? Or will the league fight back harder, doubling down on structure, suppressing agency, and trying to make an example out of him? That story is still being written. But one thing's for sure, Shedeur didn't wait for a role. He waited for a vision. And that may be the boldest and smartest move we've seen from a rookie quarterback in years. Drop your thoughts below. Is this the start of a new wave of empowered players? Or is the league going to shut it down before it spreads? And don't forget to subscribe for more no BS coverage of the stories the NFL doesn't want front and center. Because moments like this, they don't just change careers, they change culture. Shedeur Sanders didn't just decline a few team offers. He declined the way things have always been done. And in a league that prides itself on tradition, control, and hierarchy, that's about as close to sacrilege as it gets. When Cam Newton publicly confirmed that Shedeur had turned down the Ravens, the Eagles, and the Browns during the draft, it wasn't just a juicy soundbite. It was a signal, a flag planted squarely in the middle of a decades-old system that rarely gets questioned and almost never gets defied, especially by someone who hasn't played a single NFL snap. But that's exactly what Shedeur did. And what's driving owners over the edge is that he was right to do it. Let's look at what he walked away from. The Baltimore Ravens have Lamar Jackson, former MVP, face of the franchise, cemented starter. Philadelphia? Jalen Hurts, a Super Bowl-caliber quarterback with a fan base and front office fully behind him. And the Browns? Well, that's a revolving door of quarterback confusion, locker room chaos, and instability dressed up as potential. So what exactly was Shedeur supposed to be walking into? A chance to learn? A shot at competing? A real opportunity to grow into the future of a franchise? Not even close. What those teams were offering was a glass ceiling and a quiet corner. Clipboard duty. Backup branding. Practice reps that go nowhere. PR plays that would sell tickets, but never evolve into anything real. And Shedeur saw right through it. He knew that these weren't true offers, they were chess moves. Strategic placements designed to protect existing quarterbacks, not cultivate new ones. And when he said no, it wasn't just a rejection of the teams. It was a rejection of a rigged process that expects players to sacrifice their timeline for a team's comfort. Cam Newton broke it down simply. Shedeur's decision wasn't arrogant. It was respectful. Respectful of his craft, his preparation, his potential. This wasn't some rookie with inflated self-worth. This was a player making a calculated choice not to be stashed. That's a line the NFL doesn't want rookies to cross. Because when rookies start asking questions, when they start reading between the lines, evaluating the organizations, and demanding a seat at the table instead of taking the seat they're handed, the entire power dynamic shifts. And the NFL? They hate that. Owners and executives love a system where players come in wide-eyed and obedient, where they sign the deal, wear the cap, smile for the cameras, and fall in line. What they don't love is someone like Shedeur, someone who doesn't care about optics, someone who won't accept a position built on politics instead of performance. To them, Shedeur didn't just decline a backup job. He broke a rule, an unspoken one. Don't challenge the system. And it's not the first time the league has reacted this way. Look at what happens to any player who dares to steer their own narrative, especially black quarterbacks. They're labeled difficult, distracted, not a team player, not because they've done anything wrong, but because they refuse to be passive. That's what Shedeur is up against. But he's also starting something much bigger. This wasn't a tantrum. It wasn't a power trip. It was the start of something that's been brewing in the background of the league for years. Player empowerment before the paycheck even clears. In the NBA, we've seen this evolution already. Players drive trades, reject systems that don't work for them, and make career decisions that prioritize longevity and control. But in the NFL, that's still considered taboo. Shedeur just cracked that door open. And what terrifies the league most is that others are watching. College stars, future draft picks, players with leverage, with social media followings, with platforms. What happens when they all start doing what Shedeur did? When they start saying, "No thanks, I'd rather not be your insurance policy for a QB you're too scared to bench"? That's not a hypothetical anymore. That's now a very real possibility. Because here's what Cam Newton's words confirmed. Shedeur didn't break the system. He exposed it. He exposed how teams will extend offers not based on a player's fit, but based on how quietly they can be shelved. He exposed the way organizations lean on tradition to justify burying talent. He exposed the fact that saying yes to the wrong team can be career suicide. He flipped the entire risk equation. It's not risky to say no. It's risky to say yes to the wrong situation, to the wrong franchise, to the wrong development plan. And Shedeur isn't about to risk it all for a sideline spot in someone else's long-term quarterback marketing strategy. But here's the catch. Everything now hinges on how this plays out. If Shedeur lands with a team that actually sees him, values him, and builds around him, if he gets on the field, proves himself, and becomes a starter not just by default, but by design, then this moment becomes a blueprint. A new model. A new precedent for rookies who want more than a jersey and a contract. They want a career with intention. But if it doesn't work, if Shedeur stumbles, if he gets passed over, if he struggles to find a franchise that believes in his method, then the league will make an example out of him. They'll hold him up as a cautionary tale. They'll say, "See what happens when you don't follow the rules." And they'll use that fear to pull the next wave of rookies back into silence. That's how high the stakes are. This isn't just about one player's draft decision. This is a referendum on what power players actually have in a system that's designed to keep them compliant. And Shedeur? He's not waiting around to be told what his role is. He's writing it himself. With guidance from his father, with backing from veterans like Cam Newton, and with a mindset that values respect over reaction. He's already changed the conversation. Now it's up to the league to decide whether they're going to evolve, or keep pretending they still own the narrative. Either way, the status quo is cracked. And the next quarterback who walks into draft season with a plan, a voice, and a vision will have Shedeur Sanders to thank. He didn't storm out of meetings. He didn't post cryptic tweets. He didn't make it personal. He made it professional, strategic, measured. And that's the part the NFL doesn't know how to deal with. A rookie who's acting like a seasoned executive before he's even played a snap. This wasn't a fluke. It wasn't a heat-of-the-moment decision. It was the result of preparation, self-awareness, and years of mentorship. It was someone looking at the blueprint of every failed quarterback career before him and saying, "Not mine." And let's be honest, how many stories have we heard about top college quarterbacks getting drafted into the wrong system, to the wrong coach, with no development, no guidance, no shot, and flaming out before year two? How many talents have been wasted not because they weren't good, but because the organization never planned to do anything meaningful with them? Too many. And Shedeur knows that. So when the Ravens, Eagles, and Browns came calling, it wasn't enough that they were interested. The question wasn't, "Do you want me?" The question was, "Do you have a plan for me?" And if the answer was anything less than clear, intentional, and respectful of his timeline, his answer was going to be a respectful no. That's not ego. That's not delusion. That's career preservation. And Cam Newton, who's seen this league chew up and spit out quarterbacks just like Shedeur, understood that immediately. That's why he went public. Because it's not often you see a player take this kind of stand before the league gets its claws in. Cam's whole point was this. Shedeur's decision wasn't anti-team. It was pro-player. He's not refusing to compete. He's refusing to comply with a system that gives him no shot to win. Look at the situations he turned down. In Baltimore, Lamar Jackson isn't just the starter. He is the system. That's not a developmental space for a young QB. That's a vault with no key. In Philly, Jalen Hurts is the franchise, the media, the locker room, the brand. There's no controversy allowed there. And in Cleveland, there's just chaos. A team with no long-term vision, no consistency, and no record of developing young quarterbacks. So again, where's the opportunity? Because sitting behind a star might sound noble, but when there's no end game, it's just a polite way to say, you'll be invisible here. Shedeur isn't afraid of waiting. He's afraid of wasting time. And that distinction matters. Because when players like him begin making decisions based on value and structure rather than emotion and tradition, the entire landscape begins to shift. What's happening now is bigger than a quarterback room. This is a moment of cultural disruption inside one of the most rigid institutions in American sports. The NFL isn't just losing control over Shedeur Sanders. They're losing control over the narrative. The idea that players should be grateful for anything. That teams don't owe them development. That being drafted means success. Shedeur proved that being drafted doesn't mean you were chosen for the right reasons. Sometimes you're chosen because you're safe, marketable, because you'll sit quietly behind someone else without stirring the pot. But he's not interested in being a silent placeholder. He wants the right opportunity, not the first one. And that distinction? That's revolutionary. Because if this becomes normal, teams will be forced to do their homework too. To stop drafting based on optics and start drafting based on actual fit. They'll have to pitch themselves to players, explain how they plan to build around them, invest in them, protect them. That's the very thing the NFL has spent decades avoiding. They want obedient talent, not strategic partners. But Shedeur is demanding to be treated like the latter. And guess what? He's not the only one who will. He's part of a new wave. A generation raised on visibility, voice, and empowerment. They've seen what happens when you stay quiet. They've seen what happens when you wait politely for your turn. Sometimes it never comes. So now, they're choosing differently. Shedeur just happened to be the first one to do it publicly. And that's why the league is rattled. Because this story isn't going away. It's not just about what team he ends up with. It's about whether his decision changes how the next generation walks into the draft room. And frankly, it already has. So what do you think? Was Shedeur right to turn down 3 major NFL franchises? Is the league due for a new kind of player power, or is this going to blow up in his face? Let us know your take in the comments. And if you're here for more deep dives into the power plays shaking the sports world, don't forget to subscribe. Because in the NFL's battle between tradition and disruption, the game is just getting started.